Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I woke up expecting coffee and silence. Instead, a bulldozer was tearing through my lawn like it was enemy territory. No warning, no permission. Just forged documents, a power-hungry HOA, and a war I never asked for. They thought I'd stay quiet. They forgot who I am. I woke up that morning thinking it would be another quiet Friday, the kind where the only thing I had to worry about was whether my coffee machine decided to act up again. The sun was barely up, the air outside still carried that cold Virginia bite, and I was looking forward to 10 peaceful minutes on the porch before my wife got the kid ready for school. I pushed open the front door with my mug in hand and froze mid-step like someone had hit pause on my brain. Instead of my perfectly manicured front lawn, the one I had nursed for years like a stubborn patient in rehab, I saw a massive yellow bulldozer carving a raw, jagged scar straight through it. Gravel, torn turf, chunks of stone from my mosaic driveway, all of it strewn like battlefield debris. A man in a neon vest stood on the machine, gesturing for the operator to keep going, as if my property were a sandbox and he was late for a deadline. For 3 long seconds, I didn't move. I didn't blink. My brain rejected the sight so violently that it tried to convince me I was still half asleep and dreaming. Then the bulldozer roared closer and the operator leveled another slice of earth where my hand-laid stone edging had once been. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the porch. I found my voice. "Hey!" I yelled, charging forward in slippers and a t-shirt like a lunatic. "Stop! What the hell are you doing?" The foreman, a thick-necked guy with a clipboard permanently fused to his hand, turned around slowly, like I'd just interrupted him filling out a crossword puzzle. He raised a hand to the operator, and the machine finally shut down with a rattle. "Morning, sir," he said cheerfully, as if my front yard didn't currently resemble a crime scene. "We've got authorization for a community access improvement. Work order signed 3 days ago." He held up a stack of papers with the smug confidence of someone who believed laminated ink was more sacred than the Bill of Rights. I stared at the logo on his shirt, West Rock Estates HOA, and felt my stomach twist. "I'm not part of your HOA," I said, stepping closer, fists clenched. "This is my land. This is my private property. You're trespassing." He blinked once. "Not anymore, sir. Temporary public access servitude." He tapped the papers. "Approved by the HOA president, Ms. Karen Miltner, notified property owner, you." I snatched the papers from his hands. No signature from me. No phone call. Nothing but a forged scribble that barely resembled my name. I was so furious I could feel heat burning up my neck. "This is fake," I said, waving the document. "You think I'm stupid. You think I don't know what my own signature looks like?" He shrugged as if my outrage was an inconvenience, like traffic on his morning commute. "Look, pal, I don't make the rules. I just follow the work order." He turned toward the bulldozer and shouted, "Hang tight, owners being uncooperative." That word, owners being uncooperative, hit me like a gut punch, as if I was the problem here. As if they were doing me a favor by tearing up the lawn I had poured sweat, blood, and more weekends than I could count into beautifying. I yanked my phone from my pocket and called 911. My voice shook, not from fear, but from white-hot disbelief. When the patrol car pulled up, I felt a flicker of relief. Finally, someone sane. 2 officers stepped out, one older, one younger, both looking confused before they even reached me. I pointed at the bulldozer like I was introducing them to a violent criminal. "They're destroying my property right now, in front of you." The foreman greeted them like old friends, handing over the same bogus paperwork. The younger cop frowned, scrolling through a tablet they carried in their cruiser. "Huh," he murmured. "According to the GPS land registry, this strip is marked as community access." I stared at him. "That's wrong. That's not correct. Pull up the original parcel map. It should show my boundary line starting at the oak trees." He did. The map that popped up was different, altered, mutilated. The front border of my property was blurred out as if someone had dragged a smudged thumb across the screen. The officer scratched his chin. Could be a technical glitch. Or a recent update. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that felt like it came from someone else's mouth. "A glitch? That's what we're going with?" The older officer stepped forward, trying to calm both sides, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. He didn't know who was right. He didn't know what the hell was going on. And with the paperwork looking official and my boundary lines mysteriously distorted in the digital records, he couldn't legally force the crew to stop. I recorded everything: faces, equipment, damage. the bulldozer idling like a metal predator, waiting for permission to continue mauling my yard. My wife peeked out from the doorway, holding our daughter behind her, eyes wide in horror. I couldn't bear to look at them. The officers took my complaint, promised to file a report, and left. The bulldozer roared back to life. The ground shook beneath my feet. And for the first time in years, I felt something crawl across my spine that I hadn't felt since my deployments. That sense that someone had declared war on me, and they didn't even bother to tell me first. The next morning, I was at the county land records office by 7:45, coffee in one hand and a manila folder packed with every scrap of my property documents in the other. I barely slept. All night I'd been pacing, rechecking my deed, the surveyor's report from when we closed the house 8 years ago, even the original parcel maps from the realtor. I knew this land was mine. No easements, no community access. Nothing but 3 acres of clean, undisputed title. But after yesterday, trust didn't mean much unless it came with proof in triplicate and a witness from the National Archives. A clerk named Janelle helped me pull up the county parcel history. She clicked around, sipped her tea, and furrowed her brow. "That's strange," she muttered. "Your current parcel map was updated last Thursday. That can't be right." She tilted the screen toward me. My lot, parcel 109B, had a newly shaded overlay running from the street right into my front yard, labeled Temporary Community Access Corridor Route B, like it had always been there. "That's not the original map," I said flatly. "You're right," she nodded. "Let's look at historical entries." She pulled up a version from 3 weeks ago. No corridor. 2 months ago. Still nothing. 6 months ago. Clean as a whistle. Then she opened the modification record, and there it was. Modification submitted by West Rock Estates, HOA. Filed by Milner Karen L. Purpose, access realignment due to obstruction on primary route. Approved, inferred consent from adjacent parcel owner. I leaned back and stared at the screen. Inferred consent, I said out loud, like repeating the phrase would help it make sense. Janelle looked a little pale now. "This shouldn't have been processed without your signature." No shit. I took screenshots, printed everything, and left with a copy of the submission document. It was digitally signed, of course. Not by me, but by someone who apparently thought a squiggle with my name on it was good enough. Back home, I called an independent surveyor I'd worked with a few times on client projects, Leo Rand, ex-Navy, now one of the most precise geodetic engineers in Northern Virginia. He drove over that afternoon with his drone GPS equipment and a steel thermos that smelled like black coffee and despair. 3 hours later, we had hard data. The so-called road cut directly through the eastern third of my front yard into a patch of decorative red maples and my hand-laid walkway. Leo placed bright orange stakes on the true boundary lines and printed out the satellite overlay. "There's no servitude, no easement, and no gray area," he said. "This is your land, Kendrick. Period." I shook his hand like I was shaking hands with the truth itself. Then the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, Paul Finch, who lived 2 houses over. Paul was the one neighbor I actually liked. Quiet, worked in IT, had 2 beagles that never barked. He looked uneasy. "Hey," he said, eyes flicking toward the road. "You okay? I saw the construction." "Yeah, about that. You know anything?" He scratched his neck. "So, there was a meeting. Last month. Karen said the HOA needed a secondary route because the main access road was being blocked by a land dispute with the Weilers. She said they'd found a workaround and the county approved it. Nobody said anything about your yard." Of course they didn't. I thanked him, asked him to write down what he remembered, and promised to keep him out of it unless it went legal. He gave me a look like we both knew it was way past that point. Back inside, I called the county's zoning department, pretending to be just another curious homeowner. The woman on the line was polite, chatty even, until I asked her about the Route B approval. "Oh, that? West Rock Estates submitted a temporary corridor alignment. I think they claimed all homeowners had been notified." "They weren't," I said. "Then you should definitely file a challenge," she said quickly. "If you didn't consent, that's a problem, especially if any documents were altered." Oh, they were altered all right. That night, I sat in my office, surrounded by maps, deeds, satellite prints, and screenshots of my now-destroyed lawn. I compiled it into a single file, Evidence Dump V1, and made 3 backup copies. I was trained for hostile takeovers, battlefield logistics, even navigating IED zones. But this was different. This was bureaucratic war, fought with clipboards, codebooks, and digital lies. And I was just getting started. I drove down to Karen Miltner's house that afternoon, my inbox full of screenshots, maps, and the kind of evidence that would make any sane person panic. But sanity wasn't a trait I'd ever associated with our HOA president. Karen lived 4 houses down, in a pristine 2-story colonial with shutters so aggressively symmetrical they looked like she measured them with a laser level. A neat little sign staked into her lawn read West Rock HOA President. The word president was underlined twice, as if she'd branded herself the ruler of our cul-de-sac kingdom. I parked at the curb and walked up her driveway, noticing the tasteful stone path, the manicured rose bushes, and the glittering solar lanterns lining the walkway. The irony made my jaw clench. This woman had personally overseen the destruction of my lawn for a community road, yet her own yard looked like something from a gardening magazine. I rang the doorbell twice. After a moment, the door cracked open just far enough for Karen to poke her head out like she was inspecting a potential intruder. She wore a flawless cream sweater, pearl earrings, and an expression that combined condescension and irritation in equal measure. "Mr. Kendrick," she said, emphasizing the last name like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "To what do I owe this visit?" "You know damn well why I'm here," I said. "You sent a construction crew onto my property without permission. They tore up my lawn, my driveway, my landscaping, everything. I have the documents you submitted to the county. You forged my signature." She opened the door all the way, crossing her arms with slow deliberation. "I did no such thing. We submitted a request based on inferred consent from adjacent homeowners. No one objected. You didn't notify me. You weren't at the meeting." I laughed, sharp, humorless. "I'm not in your HOA. I don't attend your meetings. My property isn't part of West Rock Estates." "Oh, come now," she said, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You live inside our community's border. Whether you like it or not, your property impacts everyone around you. That makes it our business. And that gives you the right to bulldoze it. We acted in the community's best interests." I took a step closer, lowering my voice, but making sure it was cold enough to cut through her smugness. "Let's get something straight. You are not entitled to my land. You don't own it, you don't control it, and you're going to fix every inch you destroyed." Her smile didn't waver. "Feel free to take legal action, Mr. Kendrick. Our paperwork is in order. The county approved it. You can't prove anything." I stared at her for a long moment, the quiet stretch between us buzzing with tension. "You really believe that? That you can just steamroll a veteran's private property and no one will question it? Your military service is irrelevant," she snapped, her voice suddenly coated with irritation. "Stop hiding behind it." I didn't hide behind anything. I used it as a warning. I didn't lose fights. "If you think this is over," I said, "you have no idea who you're dealing with." She shut the door in my face. Back in my truck, I sat there for a moment, breathing in and out until the anger stopped pounding in my ears. Then I started making calls, first to my land use attorney, who didn't pick up, then to my former college buddy Eric, a reporter with a nose for corruption and a love for stories that made local officials sweat. He called me back within 5 minutes. "What the hell is going on?" he asked after I told him. "You're kidding. They really bulldozed your yard, and they used fake county approvals." "Yep. Send me everything." By the time I got home, Eric had already started digging. He texted me a screenshot of an email he'd sent to the county's communications director, plus a rough draft of a headline that made my stomach twist. "HOA accused of destroying veterans' lawn for unauthorized road construction." He followed it up with, "This will blow up. Brace yourself." I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or nauseous. My wife stood in the doorway as I walked in, her eyes swollen. Gare, the yard, the maple trees. She looked at me like she was afraid the damage was just the beginning. And I knew. Deep down, she was right. HOA Karens don't stop when you stand up to them. They escalate. Eric called again that evening. "Heads up," he said. "I've got 2 contractors willing to talk. One of them says Karen threatened them, told them you'd get aggressive if confronted. She said, and I quote, 'He's ex-military, easy to paint him as dangerous.' I'm getting a statement." A cold wave washed through me. Threaten my land? Fine. Threaten my reputation? That was a different battlefield entirely. I ended the call, walked to the front window, and stared at what used to be my pride and joy. The bulldozer tracks had carved scars into my lawn, deep and ragged. I felt that familiar tightening in my gut from my deployment days, the instinct that told me a situation had gone from irritating to dangerous. If Karen wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong person to start it with. The article dropped on Monday morning at 7:03 a.m. sharp. HOA bulldozes decorated veterans' private lawn for fake road construction, blared across the top of the Fairfax Times website, accompanied by high-resolution photos Eric had taken. My shattered driveway, the crushed red maples, orange boundary flags, staked defiantly into the churned-up earth. There was a photo of me, arms crossed, standing in front of the wreckage like I was guarding a crater left by a drone strike. It didn't take long. By lunchtime, the story was everywhere, syndicated on local news stations, reposted on HOA watchdog blogs, and lighting up Reddit with titles like Karen Claims Veterans Lawn for the Community Good and Tyrant HOA Caught Fabricating Road Rights. By 2 p.m., the HOA's general inbox crashed under the weight of angry emails, but the real bombshell came from the county's press office, a brief but explosive statement. There is no record of official approval for any community access corridor known as Route B. Any documents bearing county authorization stamps were not issued by this office. An investigation has been opened. Eric's follow-up report hit within the hour. He'd confirmed that the approval documents used by the HOA contained digitally manipulated seals, and at least one signature on the file, the deputy zoning commissioners, had been pulled from an old PDF and pasted onto the form. A crude forgery, and Karen's name was on every single page. I was halfway through rereading that paragraph when someone knocked at my door. It wasn't a delivery truck. It was a black Chevy Suburban with government plates. Two people stepped out, one in a dark gray suit with a state attorney's badge clipped to his belt. The other, a younger woman with a large leather folder and a digital notepad. They introduced themselves as representatives of the Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney. We've been authorized to collect preliminary witness statements in relation to the West Rock HOA and its recent construction activity, the man said. You're not wasting time, I muttered, holding the door open. They came in. I gave them coffee. Then I walked them through everything. How I woke up Friday morning to find a bulldozer on my lawn. How the foreman handed me fake paperwork. How Karen claimed my consent was implied. How the zoning maps were changed behind my back. Then I played the recording Eric had sent me, contractor audio from the worksite, where Karen told the crew, if he causes problems, say he threatened you. He's ex-military, it'll sell. The agents exchanged a glance that didn't need words. The young woman tapped rapidly on her tablet. This is very helpful, the man said, closing his notepad with a quiet snap. And unfortunately, it's not the first red flag we've seen from this HOA. We'll be contacting your attorney. As soon as they left, I called my lawyer. This time, he picked up. This is going nuclear, he said without preamble. The county is pissed. The state is circling. And I just got word that Karen's being looked at for document forgery, abuse of position, and malicious misrepresentation of zoning authority. She's done? Not yet, he said. But she's bleeding. The next 48 hours were surreal. News vans parked along our street. HOA board members tried to duck questions from reporters. One neighbor told me Karen had gone on vacation, but was really holed up inside her house with the blinds drawn and a legal team on speed dial. That Thursday, two men in polo shirts with state seal patches showed up at my gate, scanning the lawn with tablets and GPS gear. One of them introduced himself as a state land compliance auditor. They were performing a full site assessment to corroborate the survey data I'd submitted. Looks clean, one said after an hour, pointing to the GPS overlay. Boundary never moved. They built 10 feet inside your line. No justification. Not even close. Then the second guy spoke. Oh, and the county recorder's office confirmed the digital submission for the updated map came from an IP address linked to Karen Miltner's home network. I let out a low whistle. That dumb. She didn't think anyone would look. They left. I walked back into my house, poured myself a whiskey at 3:30 in the afternoon, and sat down in front of the window. The press, the officials, the paperwork, the GPS data, all of it was a barrage Karen hadn't seen coming. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. I forwarded everything, the full package, to my lawyer. We sue, I wrote. Big. He responded 3 minutes later. Civil claim. $1.8 million. Count me in. The civil suit was filed Friday morning. My attorney, Michael Fields, dropped the full complaint at the Fairfax County Courthouse, and by noon, it was already making waves. Kendrick v. West Rock HOA et al. Allegations: trespass, destruction of private property, fraudulent use of public seals, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with business expectancy, attempted unlawful transfer of land use rights. Damages claimed $1.8 million, and that was just the civil side. That same day, the state prosecutor's office announced that a criminal investigation was officially underway into the actions of HOA President Karen Miltner and unidentified associates. The charges floated in the press were serious: forgery, conspiracy, abuse of power, and falsification of county records. It didn't take long for the first rat to jump ship. On Sunday morning, a man named Todd Halpern, one of the two contractors hired by the HOA, contacted my lawyer directly. Todd wanted to talk. Michael arranged a private statement at his office. Todd showed up sweating through his shirt and holding a flash drive like it was radioactive. He confessed everything. Karen had hired them under the table, off book. She claimed she had emergency routing permission and district-level authorization for a community road extension and told them the land in question was contested but under HOA control. When Todd asked for documentation, she waved it off and said she'd deal with any blowback. But the worst part, Todd recorded a phone call with Karen from the morning of the dig, just 2 hours before the bulldozers rolled out. Her voice was unmistakable. If Kendrick shows up screaming, don't stop. Tell him you're working under county orders. If he threatens anyone, record it. We'll have legal grounds to file a protection order and bury him in complaints. He's ex-military, unstable. Play the vet card. Trust me, it'll work. That tape alone was worth its weight in gold. Michael's face went blank when he played it. Then he called the state investigator and forwarded a copy with a quiet, "Merry Christmas." By Monday, subpoenas were flying. The HOA board held an emergency meeting behind closed doors. Rumor had it several members were furious at Karen for dragging them into a criminal conspiracy. The vice president of the board, a man named Steve Dempsey, issued a carefully worded statement to the press. The West Rock HOA is cooperating fully with investigators and will refrain from further comments until internal legal reviews are complete. Translation: we're lawyering up and throwing Karen under the nearest bus. Meanwhile, Karen's house became a fortress. The blinds never opened. Her car didn't move. At one point, 2 suited men entered with briefcases and didn't leave for 3 hours. Legal crisis mode. Then came the kicker. I was at home Tuesday evening, working on a revised landscape plan for a client in D.C., when my phone buzzed. Eric, my journalist friend, texted me a single line. Guess who forged a second approval document, this time under the name of a dead county official? He attached a scan of the new document, recently submitted in Karen's defense. The approval was backdated 6 months and bore the signature of a zoning commissioner who had died in February. Game, set, match. I immediately sent it to Michael. He called me 2 minutes later. She's cooked. That's not just forgery. That's criminal fraud with intent to deceive a government entity. And she put her HOA's name all over it. Yep, that means liability, corporate and personal. By the end of the week, Fairfax County issued a cease and desist order against the HOA for unauthorized land alterations, and the state moved forward with a grand jury. Karen was now under formal criminal investigation. Her legal team tried to argue that miscommunication and procedural misunderstandings were to blame. No one bought it. As for me, I stayed calm. I planted new markers on my lawn, installed high-resolution cameras, repaired the broken edge of the mosaic driveway. My daughter asked me if the bad people were going to jail. I looked her in the eyes and said, I think they're going to wish they had just apologized. The grand jury didn't waste time. Within days, Karen Miltner was officially indicted on multiple felony counts: fraudulent misrepresentation, falsifying government records, criminal conspiracy, coercion, and destruction of private property. The press was eating it up. The phrase HOA road scandal started trending on local forums and Facebook groups like wildfire. The indictment meant that Karen was now required to surrender herself. She showed up to the courthouse with sunglasses, a tight navy suit, and the same smug expression I'd seen on her face that first day on my lawn. Cameras caught her flanked by attorneys, as if she were the victim of political persecution. Her lawyer gave a statement claiming the entire issue had been blown out of proportion by a disgruntled homeowner with an axe to grind. I wasn't surprised, but then came something I didn't expect. The second contractor, a man named Eli Gordon, came forward next. Unlike Todd, Eli had no patience for legal games. He went straight to the county prosecutor and handed over a trove of text messages from Karen. Push the gravel up to the driveway. Don't worry about the bushes, just go over them. He can replant them later. No one's going to prosecute an HOA. This isn't some big federal deal. You'll get your bonus if no one files a police report. It was plain as day. She knew what she was doing, and she thought she'd get away with it. The texts were devastating. They contradicted every word of her public defense. Within 48 hours, her legal team dropped the line about miscommunication and pivoted to isolated leadership overreach. Her HOA board, meanwhile, held a vote of no confidence. Karen was removed as president effective immediately, but the damage was already done. Investigators found that not only had Karen forged documents, she used the HOA budget to pay both contractors without proper board approval. That opened up a whole new can of worms. Financial misconduct, misappropriation of community funds, and insurance fraud. The insurance company that covered the HOA's liability took one look at the mess and denied coverage, citing fraudulent and criminal actions by board leadership, which meant the HOA itself was now fully exposed in my civil suit. My lawyer's eyes lit up when he read that letter. "They're finished," he said. And then, like dominoes falling in a perfectly cursed line, it all unraveled. One of the HOA's board members resigned and admitted that Karen had shown them doctored maps during a February planning meeting, claiming the county was planning to restructure access points for traffic safety. Another board member confessed they'd voted under pressure, afraid of being sued by Karen, who often threatened board members with personal liability if they didn't comply. It was cult-level manipulation under the banner of suburban order. Then the kicker, a whistleblower from inside the zoning office anonymously sent Eric an internal email chain. It revealed that Karen had harassed multiple county employees, pushing them to approve fake permits, insisting the land was already common use. One email even had her threatening to go over their heads to a fictitious official who, shockingly, did not exist. Eric broke the story with the headline, "HOA President Invents Fake Officials and Forges Maps to Bulldoze Veterans Lawn." It went viral statewide. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I got interview requests, podcast offers, even a call from someone claiming to represent a documentary series on HOA abuse across America. I ignored them all. The only thing I cared about was the land. So I went out and stood where my lawn used to be. The gravel road was still there, ugly and out of place. The scars of the bulldozer tracks still pressed into the soil. My daughter came outside and stood next to me in silence. After a minute, she asked, "Will we ever get it back?" I looked at the ruins of the flower beds I spent years designing, the cracked mosaic of my entry path, and I said the only thing I truly meant, yes, every inch. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the civil trial. I spotted Karen 3 rows ahead, stiff in a beige blazer, trying to look composed. She didn't glance back at me. Her new attorney, her third since the indictment, tried to convince the jury this was a land use misunderstanding exaggerated by media sensationalism. But no jury on earth was going to buy that, not after what we were about to show them. Our lead attorney, Ms. Greer, started strong. She projected a massive sitemap onto the screen, overlaying GPS boundary data, official county property lines, and drone images of the destruction. Then came the contracts, unapproved expenditures signed by Karen personally using HOA funds to hire the bulldozing crews. And then the audio recording. The courtroom fell silent. If he starts yelling, just say he threatened you. He's ex-military. People will believe it. Karen's voice, crystal clear. One of the jurors closed her eyes and shook her head. Then came the kicker, the original county map, signed, notarized, dated, with full boundary seals, proving beyond a shadow of doubt that the land was mine. Always had been. No easement, no servitude, no access corridor. Greer leaned into the moment. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a calculated, coordinated theft of private land, using forged permits and fraudulent authority. The HOA defense crumbled within 2 days. One former board member turned witness, claiming Karen manipulated the vote by threatening to sue them individually if they spoke out. Another admitted he didn't even check the documents, assuming Karen had cleared it with the county. Karen's lawyer objected more than 20 times. The judge overruled most of them. Midway through day 3, the HOA tried to settle, offering to pay part of the damages if we agreed to confidentiality. My response was simple: no deal. The trial continued. We brought in a forensic document examiner who broke down how the county permits were made using templates stolen from archived zoning forms, some over a decade old. The fake stamps? Reconstructed in Photoshop. Then came the business side. My accountant testified how I'd lost 2 major contracts as a landscape consultant because of the chaos. Clients backed off, fearing association with scandal. My daughter's school even called my wife about community disturbances. This wasn't just about a lawn, it was personal, professional, reputational. When I finally took the stand, I told the jury everything. About the morning I found a bulldozer on my lawn. About the helplessness when the police were unsure. About the sheer audacity of a neighbor trying to turn my land into a shortcut just to save their HOA money. About the feeling of being erased, one shovel at a time. By the end, I could see it in the jury's faces. They got it. The judge recessed early on the final day. Everyone knew what was coming. And sure enough, the verdict came back the next morning. HOA, West Rock Estates, liable for unlawful destruction of private property, conspiracy to defraud, and civil harassment. Karen Miltner personally liable for punitive damages. Total awarded $2.3 million. Karen's expression barely changed. She just stood there blinking as if waiting for someone to say it was a joke. But it wasn't. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters swarmed, but I didn't speak. I just walked past them to my truck, where my daughter had left a sticky note on the dash. It said in big, uneven handwriting, "You won, Daddy." And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe it. It took me 3 weeks to absorb that it was over, that I had won, that Karen was going to prison, the HOA was being dismantled, and my land, my lawn, my trees, my stones was finally mine again. Officially, publicly, legally, indisputably. After the trial, the court-appointed receivership began the dissolution of the West Rock Estates HOA. That process wasn't glamorous. Most of the remaining board members resigned before the ink dried. The HOA's remaining funds, what hadn't been squandered on Karen's legal fees or fraudulent permits, were liquidated. A court order forced the sale of their common-use property, a modest clubhouse and a narrow strip of tennis courts. That money went into a trust to partially cover the damages the court had awarded me. The rest was Karen's responsibility, but Karen didn't have that kind of money. Her primary residence was leveraged to the hilt, her savings depleted, and her assets tied up in probate with her ex-husband's estate. The court placed a lien on her home, garnished her remaining income, and transferred her SUV, yes, the one with the HOA Pride bumper sticker, into asset liquidation. It wasn't enough to pay what she owed, not even close, but it was a start. Karen herself was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison with a non-parole period of 5. Charges included falsifying government documents, conspiracy to commit land fraud, and coercion of contractors under threat of financial retaliation. She didn't cry when the sentence was read. She just looked at the judge with glassy defiance, then turned and walked out with the bailiff like she still ran the show. She didn't. I returned to my property that night in a quiet kind of fog. The path that had once been my mosaic stone driveway had been reduced to rutted gravel and loose soil. The scars from the bulldozer tracks hadn't faded, and the ornamental trees I had planted with my daughter 3 years ago, both Japanese maples, were gone. Cut, uprooted, destroyed. I stood in the middle of it all, feeling hollow, not angry, not victorious, just tired. But then something shifted. My wife came outside with a mug of coffee and a roll of old blueprints. My daughter followed, holding a small potted sapling. The note stuck to the side read, "Replacement number 1." I smiled. We began rebuilding the very next day. It started with the lawn. I resodded every inch by hand, refusing to hire a crew. It took longer, but it felt right. Every strip of turf laid down with the kind of attention the land deserved. I repaved the driveway with a new pattern, more intricate than the last, a sort of tribute to persistence. I even installed a discreet solar-powered surveillance system along the edge of the property, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned the hard way. Documentation matters. But the real change came when the media coverage of the case snowballed beyond our county. My story got picked up by a larger news outlet, then syndicated nationally. Soon, I was getting calls, not just from journalists, but from lawmakers. It turns out my case wasn't unique. I got letters from people in Florida, Texas, Oregon, people whose HOAs had tried similar land grabs, citing bogus easements, pushing residents into forced compliance, or levying insane fines. People were angry. People were scared. People needed help. And for once, I was in a position to offer some. A state senator reached out, inviting me to speak at a policy committee hearing on HOA reform. I went, in a suit that barely fit, carrying a binder of photos. Before and after shots of my yard, screenshots of forged permits, and the transcript of Karen's recorded threat. At the hearing, I told them the same thing I had told the jury. This didn't happen because someone made a mistake. It happened because someone had power and thought no one would stop them. It hit. The room went quiet. Then the questions came. Real ones, hard ones. I answered every single one. 3 months later, the Kendrick Act was introduced into state legislature. It passed with bipartisan support. The law was simple. HOAs are prohibited from initiating any infrastructure development outside of their legally defined boundaries without a notarized, filed, and recorded consent from the landowner and a double verification from the county land commission. Falsification of such documents became a Class B felony. No more vague maps, no more interpretations, no more Karen. The ripple effects were immediate. Several HOAs in our region were audited. One in Arlington was found to have paved an illegal parking lot across a retiree's backyard. They were forced to remove it and pay damages. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was bigger than that. As for me, I turned part of my newly rebuilt front yard into a public space. Not open access, let's not get carried away, but a symbolic memorial. Right where the bulldozer first bit into my land, I installed a stone plaque. Nothing dramatic, just a square piece of engraved granite nestled into the lawn. It read, "In honor of those who stood their ground against those who thought they could steal it." People still walk by and read it. Some stop and take pictures. A few knock on my door and say thank you. One day, I came home to find a small envelope taped to the plaque. Inside was a photo of another torn-up yard, this one in Nevada, and a short note, "We're fighting back. Thanks for showing it's possible. I never signed up to be a symbol. I just wanted to protect my lawn." But sometimes, when people push you hard enough, when they bulldoze through your piece and then lie about it, you push back. And when you do it with facts, with evidence, with grit, and a little help from the law, you don't just get your land back, you get your dignity. I still look at my lawn every morning with my coffee. Not because I think someone will try again, but because I earned the right to stand on it. And no one, no HOA, no Karen, no bulldozer will ever take that from me again.